Well, hello and welcome to Weather Wagers. I'm Dan Tomaso. Brett and Mr. Shiner will be along in just a little bit, but we wanted to start out first by saying it was a great night of Philly sports. I keep seeing on Twitter over the last couple of weeks that perhaps after such a great sports year, things have not started out well for the Sixers in their Celtics series, for the Phillies in the beginning part of their series, but things are turning around in a rapid fashion. The Sixers taking care of business last night with a pretty easygoing win, all things considered, especially when you're playing Boston. In addition to that, the Phillies got off the schneid. They certainly had their hands full with the Red Sox over the weekend. And if you watched the game on Friday, as I did, game started out too with a fan falling over the flower boxes into the bullpen. So the weekend series got off to a very rough start. Still, I have not heard any official update on the condition of that young man that was unfortunately injured going for a ball in the flower box and then toppling over into the bullpen. So that was a very scary start to the series. The Phillies did not fare well in games 1 and 2 of that big Red Sox series. The Red Sox were red hot coming in, but then all of a sudden on Sunday, Taijuan Walker found his splitter, found a good fastball and command, looked very, very sharp, and they win the Sunday series. But there's no rest for the weary. They had one day off. They faced the Blue Jays in a quick 2-game series last night. Aaron Nola looked more like vintage Aaron Nola. Velocity was up just a tick. Things were looking pretty sharp on his end of things. He did give up a home run to Mr. Bo Bichette, who's been hotter than hot. Matt Chapman also very hot for the Blue Jays, and Mr. Vlad Guerrero as well. So in general, the Blue Jays playing very good baseball coming into this series, but Phillies take game 1. We'll see what happens in game 2 tonight. Zach Wheeler on the bump. Some other quick Phillies news and notes to share with you. Bailey Falter being taken out of the rotation as the Phillies travel west. So after this home game tonight, they'll be traveling westward to the Rockies, playing Colorado there, then going out to San Francisco. So a little bit of a West Coast swing. Schedule has not gotten easier, but the Rockies might be the little respite in there. You just never know in Coors. That's the only thing I caution about that. Ranger Suarez also joining the rotation as Bailey Falter gets bumped out. And as you've been following, Matt Strahm, who actually did very well in his fill-in role for the Phillies in the rotation, coming out of his bullpen role, is now being pushed back to the bullpen to help save his innings load for the year. So the Phillies perhaps on the up and up. Actually looking at the standings this morning, so as of Wednesday, the Phillies are in third place behind those upstart Marlins. Miami Marlins just never go away, it seems like. The Braves have had a very good start to the season, though, and well out ahead of everyone in the NL East. In fact, they're the only team above 500 in the NL East, so that's something to watch. The Phillies did leapfrog the Mets, though. Mets having some injury concerns of their own. Max Scherzer scratched from his latest start, so that'll be something to follow with neck spasms. May not be a long-term injury. Carlos Carrasco may be coming back on a rehab slowly, getting back into the rotation. Justin Verlander just in the rotation. So perhaps this is a good time for the Phillies to get hot, as they haven't really played the Mets in division yet. In fact, they've only played one divisional series so far, the lowest in the division, which is a weird stat to keep track of, but just shows you or I should say, it's not unbalanced anymore. It is a balanced schedule now for MLB that you play every single team. And so that's led to some of these matchups with AL East teams going out west as well. So the Phillies have had a pretty hard schedule to start out May and to end out April. So just kind of keeping everything in the full circle there of the scheduling. A couple other notes for you, too. The Atlanta Braves, Max Fried, sent to the IL, the injured list, due to a forearm strain. So that's something to follow. He's their big ace. He is now on the shelf. Kyle Wright also on the shelf for the Braves. So they're relying on a lot of young pitching plus Charlie Morton. So those are some NL East news and notes. And with that, I do want to talk about the forecast here looking ahead, because we do have some big matchup, as I mentioned here, at least for Wednesday night into Thursday. Any Major League Baseball games from the Midwest to the Northeast should be generally fine. Things do start to pick up, though, looking ahead to Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And here's the reason why. We have an area of low pressure coming in from the Midwest. As that arrives, there's more and more rain that picks up across the Ohio Valley. So kind of timing this out, Midwest, upper Mississippi River Valley, even down through Dallas, Houston, Louisiana, there's a fair amount of rain with this front. So any games around the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, through parts of the Carolinas, into Washington, D.C., those are areas we begin to watch. Now, Friday night is when this rain begins to push in. Saturday during the middle part of the day is when it moves across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, the Northeast. And so we already know there's going to be some showers on Saturday locally here in central Pennsylvania, but for any games in the Mid-Atlantic, that will be problematic. And then looking ahead to Sunday, things do start to dry out, although the next low along the front starts to get that going across the Midwest and the Mississippi River Valley. So with all that being said, kind of summarize things for you. As the Phillies head west, they actually run into this thunderstorm threat with the developing low. So for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if the Phillies get delayed, postponed on Friday, that could affect their Saturday, Sunday games. Plus, as I mentioned, let's actually step back here and I can show a little bit more of that. Looking again toward Colorado, that next storm into Sunday looks mainly to stay south of the Denver area, but it is close. And given that this is about a 5-day forecast out, things could change. So it's just something to keep an eye on, something to monitor here for the Phillies series. So that actually could be interrupted by rain. Oftentimes you go out to Colorado, it's relatively dry, not a big weather impact, but those are things to watch. The Astros coming into the White Sox playing a little bit better baseball. The Astros still trying to find their footing so far this year, kind of like the Phillies, a little bit of a World Series hangover, playing subpar baseball at times, that they still have very good pitching, though. So they come into Chicago Friday and Saturday. Those games could be in jeopardy, as I mentioned, with the Midwestern lows coming through. And then into the Mid-Atlantic on Saturday, especially for the Orioles. Orioles, good matchup here of young teams that have started out the season hot. The Pirates have come a little bit back to earth, but the Orioles are keeping pace mainly with the Tampa Bay Rays. The hottest team in baseball throughout the entire course of the season so far has been the Rays, but the Orioles right behind them there in division. And so if you would have told me coming into the year it would be Rays 1, Orioles 2, that would be a big development overall. So fun series there down in Birdland at Camden Yards. And then Mets and Nationals. So the Mid-Atlantic, not a great place to be for Saturday, possibly into Sunday too. And the Mets just keep finding rain and rain delay issues to follow. So just keep that in mind too. Mets and Nationals, one issue there. And again, it could carry over into Sunday. Angels, Guardians. So Ohio Valley, I mentioned that as part of the rain coming through the track of this low. So Saturday and Sunday, watching Angels, Guardians matchup. So those are the ones to keep in mind if you are trying to figure out some of the betting lines and trying to follow some games there over the weekend. Again, we've already had our fair share of rain issues, especially with the Mets, so it has been a concern so far this season. Just keep all that in mind, and that is our look at this weekend's MLB games. A couple other news and notes for you. I thought this was very interesting, so I'm going to quote Adam Schefter here of ESPN. So it is now official. You will see the 2023 NFL regular season schedule being released Thursday, May 11th. So it'll be coming after our podcast. We'll talk about it this upcoming week. We've mentioned it many times on this podcast. The NFL has made this a year-round event. NFL does not rest for very long. We just had the draft. Now we're talking about a schedule release. And they also know matchups. So here's a little tidbit from Schefter. The season schedule will feature 14 playoff rematches from last season, the most in NFL history, including rematches of the Super Bowl, so Chiefs, Eagles. So that'll be a very interesting litmus test early for both teams, and both conference champions. So championship matchups, the Bengals and Chiefs and the 49ers and the Eagles. There's been a lot of trash talking on the 49ers side about the Eagles. And then all 4 divisional games. So going back to the Bengals and Bills, Jaguars and Chiefs, Cowboys, 49ers, and Giants, Eagles. So obviously, Giants, Eagles, they play because they're in division, but Cowboys, 49ers will be a great regular season game, as too will be Jaguars and Chiefs. The Jags trying to get up to that next level in the AFC, but Bengals and Bills, always a good game, and who knows? Damar Hamlin says he's going to come back. Could that be his moment there? We'll wait and see. Some other changes, which we've also mentioned on this podcast. The NFL will have a Black Friday game for the first time ever. The games don't necessarily belong to television networks anymore. All games will be free agents. So this could play into some of the local blackout problems we have here in central Pennsylvania. If you are a Steelers or a Ravens fan, oftentimes one of them gets the boot. Oftentimes it seems like it's the Steelers in favor of the Ravens. So something to keep in mind there moving into this next season, that perhaps some of these blackout issues could be alleviated, or could it be that the Eagles get blacked out on occasion if the Steelers play on Fox, for instance? That's happened before too. So kind of some things to keep in mind. This is also interesting of a scheduling note. Teams can be on Thursday Night Football only twice a season. So this is to prevent travel issues and wearing the guys down. But not all teams, this is another very interesting point, are guaranteed a primetime spot. So the teams that perhaps are tanking or not in a very competitive position in their franchise, they're not guaranteed anything, which I find very interesting. And the other nugget that was posted online yesterday, so this also coming from Adam Schefter, that Donna Kelsey posted a Facebook comment on May 5th saying that the Chiefs play the Eagles week 2 in Arrowhead. So I mentioned this rematch of the Super Bowl. It could come as early as week 2 in Arrowhead. So the Eagles would have to travel out there. Just something to keep in mind early in the season. This could be a big litmus test. So perhaps the Eagles' undefeated run of last year will not be as long, which I'm okay with. Get the loss out of the way faster. One other note, so this is Major League Baseball scheduling notes. So Major League Baseball taking more of a international flavor. This has been something that's been mentioned several times in the past. Let me see if I can pull it up here. So according to our good friend Matt Gelb from The Athletic, so this was on Twitter as well, it was supposed to happen in 2021, but it's going to happen again. The Phillies and Mets will play in London June 8th and 9th, 2024. It was first reported by Sports Illustrated. The Phillies will have the first reported international trip of their own. We just saw a game played in Mexico City with the Padres. That was 7,000 feet above sea level. I know some players were complaining about the ease at which balls were going out of the ballpark. So that'll be very interesting to see what's going on, if that'll happen again because of some of those altitude issues. But this one going over to England, so that should be a very interesting matchup between the Phillies and Mets traveling across the Atlantic Ocean to play Major League Baseball. So Brett Thacker will be along here in a minute. We're going to talk more about the betting scandals we saw across college baseball. Also some issues at Iowa State, some things to consider there. And then we'll also talk about some of the college football odds. So you want to stay tuned for all of that. And we're back here on Weather Wagers. Brett Thacker, I found him in the annals here of ABC 27. He's a busy man here today.
What a day I've had. I am running all over the place. But you, did I hear you were talking about the NFL schedule release?
I was. And
they make everything an event. Can the NFL just not have an event?
Well, listen, and here's the most interesting thing. And you're a TV guy, so you get this and why I think this is a big deal. No team is guaranteed a primetime spot anymore. That's one of the things that came out yesterday. And no game is loyal now to one network, which I find very interesting. So the Eagles could play on Fox. They could play on CBS. And I said, at least for Central PA, what's interesting about that is the blackout problems we have with the Steelers and Ravens. Maybe this kind of changes things up a little bit where one could be on Fox, one could be on CBS. Maybe the Eagles get blacked out some games. We'll have to wait and see.
And you and I mean, we love the TV side of it.
Yeah.
I think that intrigues people, the media side of sports. And I don't know if you saw this, but they did announce the Black Friday primetime game.
Yes.
Did you mention that?
I did mention that.
So the Jets and the Dolphins,
Jets,
and of course they get
right.
the Aaron Rodgers bump, the big market bump. So, you okay there?
Yep. No, we're good.
Went out afraid.
The screen just changed, but we're good.
It's an interesting ploy because on that day now there's going to be a Big Ten afternoon game likely on CBS.
Yes.
You're going to have your prime game, which is the Jets and the Dolphins, and then you're going to have a prime time 6 p.m. 7 p.m. game on NBC.
It's
Big Ten game.
Yes.
So that is really something.
The Big Ten on NBC, I cannot wrap my mind around it.
Everything's changing starting in the fall, so we're excited about that. All right, we do want to mention, since we do talk wagering and some of the lines on this podcast, that there have been some college betting scandals going on.
Indeed.
And one of them involved the Alabama baseball coach who was fired within the last week because there was some suspicious activity. There's all kinds of reports out there. Yahoo, ESPN, The Athletic, of course, going into detail here. I don't think anybody knows exactly what happened, and we're certainly not pretending to know or report on it. But, the reports that are out there basically say that somebody placed a wager.
A large wager.
Allegedly a large wager on the Alabama-LSU game last Friday. and the starting pitcher was scratched before the game. And I guess that when one of the monitoring systems for sports betting in this country, I forget the name of the company, I think it's like U.S. Integrity, they realized that the person was talking to the baseball coach before the game. On camera, on the phone. They saw the coach's number. So the coach was released. At this point, they do not believe any players were implicated. Now, we don't know the extent of the coach's involvement, but we do know that after looking into it, he was fired by the University of Alabama. There is nothing more important than integrity in sports. And, Dan, I think that goes for the games themselves, the enjoyment of the games for fans, whether the fans are 5 years old or 95 years old.
Yes.
And also for those of us that do place wagers on games, that has become a part of the sports world and a part of the entertainment world. And there is nothing more important than making sure those games have integrity behind them so that nothing nefarious is going on. Nobody wants there to be anything nefarious going on. So before we get into the other story that broke about this, do you believe that having legalized sports gambling actually will help catch some of these things?
I was going to say, so the positive spin on all this that I've seen, at least in the Alabama case, is that this shows there's a process in place that can catch these things before they blow up into something bigger.
And probably an easier process.
Right.
Because really, remember where this took place. This was at, I believe it's called the Great American Sportsbook at the Cincinnati Reds ballpark. They have a sports book within the baseball stadium. Now, the reason that this maybe was flagged or caught is that, A, it's in a baseball stadium. The Reds were not home at the time.
And it's Alabama baseball being bet on in Ohio.
Yeah. Well, listen, that can happen, but sometimes eyebrows are raised.
But a large wager
very large,
out of the blue, and so this also brought up another point that I saw too. Sometimes these things can be a little bit harder to spot because it's not necessarily a lot of money. In this case,
correct,
it was a lot of money.
Yes.
But in addition to that, this brought into a whole conversation of college and the involvement of young athletes in the betting world. And what I didn't even realize this. So in the Big Ten, Michigan State had an agreement, I believe, with Caesars. Mm-hmm. LSU also had an agreement in place with another sports book as a sponsorship. Mm-hmm. And so now...
And they may be taking a look at those things.
Yes, those agreements, from what I understand, will be allowed to expire and not be renewed. So, I think we all kind of dove into this head first, whether it's the university level, whether it's the sports books. And now, upon further review, they're taking steps to kind of back off a little bit. And the English Premier League, so I don't follow soccer very much, but apparently the English Premier League went as far as having patches on their uniforms.
Right. I know that you had mentioned that to me last week in a conversation, we were having not on the air or anything, but you just said, I didn't realize that was a thing. So, yeah, I think you can mix things too much. Now, again...
Because, again, that kind of, if they're sponsored by that sports book, are they working too tightly with them?
Now, but again, this is all legal, and again, it's part of what has become part of the entertainment process. But, again, for those of us laymen, if we want to place a $5 wager on Alabama baseball, if we want to place a $10 wager on a football game, there's nothing more important to me than if I'm going to take my hard-earned money and spend it like that, I want to make sure that there's integrity there.
Correct.
And that goes back to my main point that because everything is very legalized now and it's easy to do on your phone or even, in person, I think it's going to raise awareness of some of the fishy stuff that goes on and kind of weed it out. And I think that's the hope. So speaking of that, Iowa and Iowa State are under the gun now.
Correct.
Now, this is a different type of scandal, but already we're kind of seeing, okay, the Alabama thing blew up. Now maybe there's a heightened awareness of this. Then all of a sudden, just a few days later, you get Iowa and Iowa State to blow up. And I want to read the rule that you sent me.
Yeah, this is an interesting rule, and I wasn't fully aware of how this worked, but now it makes more sense to me.
Well, it makes more sense, and the athletes are told this. So what happened at Iowa and Iowa State? Okay, so first of all, again, to recap, the Alabama baseball situation, the coach was involved. No players. The coach was involved somehow. We don't know the extent. He was fired. This situation was the players. However, these players at Iowa and Iowa State, from what we can tell, and again, there are reports out there, the usual places we mentioned, ESPN, The Athletic, that they were not betting or there was nothing going on with their sport. Whatever sport they were playing or their games, there was no scandal there. However, NCAA rules prohibit athletes, coaches, and staff from betting on amateur, collegiate, and professional sports in which the NCAA conducts a championship. So, for example, athletes cannot bet on NFL games, even if state laws would legally allow them to do so if they weren't competing under NCAA rules. So, like you said, if you're a college basketball player, can't bet on the NBA.
Correct.
They have a championship. I mean, the NCAA championship.
Yep.
Whatever sport you're playing. So, that says to me, if I'm an NCAA athlete, I better just stay away from it.
Right, and I think where these Iowa State kids may have run aground a little bit.
We don't know.
Right.
But it could have been something as I'm going to take $5 on the Lakers tonight.
Right.
You can't do that, and now all of a sudden they're going to be punished for it.
Well,
but it is a rule.
And taking a step farther back, this goes to the Rick Neuheisel situation. We've mentioned this on the podcast before.
I just read about that. Yep.
So what never made sense to me is, so Rick Neuheisel essentially was busted participating in an NCAA basketball pool. So like what everyone else does in the world, your workplace or whatever has, a
$5, $10
right.
pool, or the ESPN bracketology or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And so he was found out that he had this involvement with a pool.
Now, just for the record, this was at the University of Washington. He was the head coach there at the time.
He was the head football coach. But again, probably very minuscule money, very minimal involvement.
Something fun to do.
And he claimed that there was an email from the University of Washington saying it was okay to do such a thing. But again, this rule is in place that anyone involved with any college athletics cannot participate in any gambling activity related to a sport with a championship within college.
Yeah. Now, I think the timing of said email and that rule, there was something. I think he sued and won.
Yes, I think he did,
and then he came back to coaching, obviously.
Right. So, part of me says maybe this needs to be relooked at. To me, what is the harm in having a college basketball player, place a couple $1 bet on the NFL? I'm not quite seeing the full connection there. I guess in theory,
I think that here's I can answer that question for you. Well, I sort of agree with you. If I'm a junior in college and I know somebody that just got drafted,
sure,
I might be able to know some inside information from whatever team that he's on.
Right.
And we could be working together to scam the system. Now, is that likely in all of these cases? Of course not. I think it's kids betting a couple of bucks, like you said, on the NFL. Right. But I do think there is that thought process that they may know more than the average bear. And so you have to be careful.
Communities are small.
Yeah.
So in theory, you could know a coach.
Right. Because, again, coaches go back and forth. I guess my question then is, and I want to wrap this up because we have something fun coming up, but what happens now? Should we embrace this? Again, the legalization of betting, I tend to say yes. It's to me, it's no different than, as long as you're responsible, spending $20 to go to a movie. I don't want to see Guardians of the Galaxy. I may lay $20 on the game tonight and hope I make it 40. That's what I'm doing. Now, I may lose it. Okay, that was my entertainment for the night. You've got to be responsible and know your limits and all of that, and we talk about that a lot. But should we embrace the legalization of this? Because if so, we're kind of weeding out some of these really nefarious undertones to gambling that you may have caused a ruckus 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the moral of the story to me, that there is a system in place. There are these integrity businesses, offices in place to catch these things. And this, to me, shows the system works.
Yeah, and they want it to work.
Right.
Nobody is more invested in having integrity than the sports books, than the casinos, than the sports themselves. If you find that your institution has a scandal, you're done. Well, nobody's going to trust it. And they want you to trust it.
So here I want to bring up one more point with the college football aspect of it, or even basketball too. With NIL comes money to these student athletes they've never had before. And so just like every other American individual that earns a paycheck, you got to be responsible with it. And so this was always the problem, if you will, that NCAA had with NIL, is like, well, you're giving a lot of money to someone that's not very mature right now.
Yeah. But then, the argument is, too, that I know some 55-year-olds that are not mature and some 25-year-olds that are. So, you've got to take personal responsibility. I think you bring up some good points, and these are things that are going to keep coming up. We'll talk about them as they do. Kirk Ferentz, I saw, made a statement yesterday, and again, I don't think any of the Iowa situation, the Iowa State involved any games that these players were in.
No.
The Alabama one did involve a game, but it was just the coach.
It was just the coach.
And so he's gone now. And of course, you can go to your favorite sports website and read more about it. We just wanted to offer a nuanced take and
Indeed.
try to talk it out. So now the fun comes, and we are turning now to our college football futures. The spring is over, gentlemen. The spring is over, at least in the
Unreal.
football world.
Yes.
So now,
All 2 weeks worth of it. The 15 practices you get, which I think is a joke.
yeah, well, in many ways. And again, there's still rules and regulations there, too.
Right.
So what DraftKings did, and many other books, I noticed Caesars did it too, which we typically use, but I pulled from DraftKings here that these are the college football futures. The win totals have been released. So I want to go through these, and I want to just talk about, see if any stand out to you. We can look at schedules. We can talk about schedules. We've got plenty of time to do this. So we're going to start in the Big Ten. Show us both columns here, Dan. These are the Big Ten futures and their win totals.
I was not going to reveal that second column. It's pretty ugly.
Well, it is. Now, by the way, just so you know, when I made this list yesterday and checked it out, Iowa and Iowa State were pulled because of
the
the
issue.
revelation.
Right.
So just like as soon as the Alabama baseball thing was flagged, betting was stopped on Alabama baseball. And now there's no Iowa or Iowa State win total. So that's why there's one team missing here in the Big Ten. I just wanted to
Interesting,
make
yep.
that clear. Does anything stand out to you here on this list? I mean, you've got teams like, to me, Illinois, Maryland, that, 6.5, 7 wins. That's interesting.
Mike Loxley just got his extension, by the way. That was announced yesterday.
Interesting. Well, as I've said before, you can't spell Loxley without 11 L's. Michigan State, though, 5.5. Now, I want to focus on Michigan State for a second. This was your team last year that I'm going to remind everybody you picked to win the Big Ten. It was a terrible pick. Mel Tucker just lost his quarterback to Hugh Freeze. Peyton Thorne going to Auburn. By the way, an Ohio State quarterback also transferred to Auburn, so Hugh Freeze just rated the two top Big Ten teams. 5.5. The narrative surrounding Mel Tucker right now is
not good.
It's completely different than where you were sitting last year.
Yes.
Just talk to me about Michigan State and that 5.5 number. Can they go over that? I'll pull up the schedule while you just talk about Mel Tucker here and where that program is.
If they don't, there's going to be some calls from Mel's head, unfortunately. When you're lumped in with Rutgers and Indiana, which I don't think Indiana is getting a very fair shake in all that either. I mean, we know they're, generally speaking, a very tough team to play, and I always like what their coaching staff does. They're competitive. I would actually.
They struggled though last year.
Yes, they did. They did. I would move Nebraska down. I mean, I think that's going to be a slow build out there in Cornhusker land. Purdue too. I mean, I know Purdue just lost their coach and Jeff Brom, and they're going to go through a transition. But 5.5 seems low for a team that always puts up points.
I don't know. I mean, all right. Let's look at the Michigan State schedule though. Okay, Central Michigan, and you've got Sharkbait Jim McElwain there.
He'll get a big job eventually, I think.
Yeah, keep in mind. I mean, that could be depending on how they catch them.
That's a tough first game.
We struggled with them last year, but give them the win there. Then they have Richmond at home. Give them the win there.
Yeah, they'll beat the Spiders.
So that's 2. Then you've got Washington coming in mid-September.
Wow.
Now they get them at home, but I think Washington's a good football team.
Yeah, I mean, they're a top 15 team, I think.
Now, they play all of the first 4 games at home. Maryland comes to town. That could be an interesting one. If you assume that Maryland is better, they're still only at 2 wins. They have to go to Kinnick Stadium. I don't like that. Then they have to go to Rutgers. Let's give them that. 3 wins. Okay. They do get Michigan at home this year, but that could be tough. They have to go to Minnesota.
It's always hard.
That's always hard. They welcome Nebraska at home. Let's give them one of those. Let's give them Minnesota or Nebraska.
Okay.
So where are we at? 4? See, this is why Vegas is smart. Ohio State, they have to go to the Horseshoe. That's a loss. They go to Indiana. We can give them that. That's 5. And then they host Penn State at the end of the year. So we got to 5.
Yep. So I guess it does make some sense.
You could maybe they could pick off Washington or Maryland. I don't know. I mean, they just lost their quarterback. I got to go under.
Yeah, we don't know what's there. I mean, that's all what the first month to me is about. When September rolls around, we got to see what these teams got, and then I guess.
What do you think of Wisconsin at 9 and their rebuild situation?
I do not buy
Luke
that.
Fickell just going to come in there and rattle off 9 wins.
They were devoid of talent last year.
They were, yeah.
And so, to me, how you fix that in one offseason, unless it's all
portal.
unless it's all transfer portal. But Penn State. 9.5. New quarterback. Makes me a little skittish. But
Well, it would if we didn't have the O-line and the running game and
Yep.
the defense to back it up. And I think that's the difference here. Not only do you have the new quarterback is a 5-star hopeful. So I think that in and of itself is a good thing. But I think when you look at the talent surrounding it, that's fine. So we did talk about Penn State's schedule before, but we'll rattle off some of this. They open against West Virginia at home, then Delaware. Illinois, yeah, they have to go to Illinois. Keep an eye on that one. But again, you would assume that's a win. Iowa at home, Northwestern on the road, UMass. The first really, really tough game is at Ohio State.
Yep.
We go there in mid-October. And then Indiana, Maryland, Michigan we get at home, Rutgers, and Michigan State. Again, there's 2 games on there. And you could maybe convince me of a third, so there's your 9.5.
yeah.
But, again, Vegas knows. But I mean, you could definitely, if I had to pick today, which is the fun of this, I would go over. I would say we could get to double-digit wins.
Wow.
I would.
Okay.
You?
I have to see it. I mean, I would probably go under. I have to see Drew Aller be the guy. I mean, I think people really underestimate how hard it is to win in the Big Ten.
Well, no, I agree with you there. But, I mean, I'm just saying if
you
get.
can't have a letdown. And that was
No.
the one thing with Sean Clifford. To me, he had his moments, but the true letdown games were against Ohio State and Michigan.
Right, and last year was a prime example of that. Now, he did finally get a signature win at the end of the year against Utah, a tough Utah team, but there's some interesting ones on there, and I wish, we could probably talk about that list for the next hour. Who do you like? Michigan and Ohio State are right at the top. I will tell you, though, I am hearing some bad things out of Ohio State land.
Yeah, Columbus, I think, is hurting a little bit, but I also think Michigan's hurting a little bit. I mean, they've had their fair share of issues with their OC. To me, they're a physical team, but they don't have the weapons.
Well, they do have the quarterback.
Do they?
I think so.
I have not seen it. I will proudly say I have not seen it.
Well, I didn't see it against TCU when it counted.
Right. That's what I mean.
But Ohio State, they're one of these, preeminent programs. You just think they roll over into the next year. Doesn't matter who leaves. Well, I'm hearing there's questions about quarterback. I'm hearing there's a lot of questions on the O-line. And I'm also hearing that
they don't have Paris Campbell anymore.
They are Penn State right now is looking at an Ohio prospect, quarterback prospect, to come in behind Drew Aller. Now, this guy was off everybody's radar. He slowly started to rise up the ranks, just like Aller. I don't know how many stars he has right now, but it's either going to be 4 or 5. Kid was at the 2016 whiteout game. This kid is all Ohio State, grew up an Ohio State fan. His mom went there, big Ohio State family. Went to the whiteout game, made a big impression on him, okay? And you know who doesn't want him?
Ohio State.
Ohio State. And Ryan Day's son is about to go to this kid's high school, and he still hasn't given him a look. And
that's an interesting story.
And my point with all of that is, if Penn State could land him, that would be big for many reasons, but also what's going on in Columbus? Something's odd to me.
It's hard to maintain such consistency. Before we move on from this, I just want to bring in another resident Penn State fan, Mr. Dave Shiner. What do you think of the 9.5?
I think they go over, but it's ultimately going to come down to how Aller, looks once he's out there. But I do think the fact that you get Michigan at home
does help.
And I think this run game is something special. I really do. You got 2 studs back there. If they are able
and a transfer from Minnesota, so now you're 3 deep with Trey Potts.
But if you're able to control the ball with the run game, it takes the pressure off of Drew a little bit. So I think they can get that. Now, the only thing I will say about Ohio State, you guys are poo-pooing them here and there. They still have Marvin Harrison Jr. And that guy, I don't care where you throw the ball, he comes down with it.
He'll catch it. You can throw it at shoelaces.
That's going to make any quarterback better.
Well,
David, that's only one player. That's only one player.
David. I was trying to set up a narrative here, and the one thing I didn't mention was, their wide receiver room is the best in the country.
Yep.
Hands down, you are absolutely
ours is
right.
middling.
But my point is, and I will go back to this narrative. That's fine. You can have great wide receivers. Yeah, and ours is not so great. But when you are talking about the Ohio State University, and you have questions at quarterback, and you have questions at O-line, and you have questions on the defense, and you have questions about what's going on with their recruiting, and you have questions with how their season ended last year and the Michigan factor. I'm just saying there's more questions there than there have been in a long time. I don't, and I am not trying to put down Ohio State in any way.
Oh, no.
They are going to continue to be a force. All I'm saying is that there might be,
Crack.
There might be a crack.
Yeah.
And you now have to take advantage of that with your 5-star quarterback and your running game and your O-line that you haven't had in the James Franklin era to go through that crack.
Does Drew Aller throw 2 interceptions to lose to Ohio State at home? I guess that's the question we got to figure out.
Yep. And it's always going to come down to, can Franklin get these signature wins against Ohio State and Michigan? And
Yeah.
if they get those wins, I mean, you're looking at a possible undefeated season.
Or at least
as
get
long
one.
as
Just
someone
give-
like Iowa
give me
doesn't screw
one.
us over again.
Well, that's
that always
the
is out
classic
there.
letdown.
Yeah,
Right.
and-
But I think the fact you get Michigan at home, that one's hopefully going to be a whiteout depending on what channel it's on. If it's a noon kickoff, we all know how we love that big noon kickoff. But
Screaming, the
Throw that in
screaming.
the dumpster.
if Aller's the real deal, this might be the year that they get the shot because, like you said, those other premium programs do have a couple question marks.
I would love it if we could get in before the 12-team playoff.
That would be awesome.
I mean, because
It would
then
just-
then you would really earn that
And
spot.
that would maybe silence some of the Franklin critics out there too, because he would have hopefully those signature wins at that point.
And I think, when I listen to the national pundits, I listen to the Andy Staples show a lot, and Ari Wasserman is on there. He always gets accused of being a Buckeye homer because he covered them. But he
Probably is. There's a lot of them out there.
Well, but I want to be fair. He's not a homer. He writes for them. You know how fans are too. But he made the comment about Penn State on a recruiting podcast a couple of weeks ago. And he's a national guy, and he said, "Yeah, I mean, they're Penn State."
Yeah.
And somebody's like, "Okay, but you sound like you're down." He goes, "Well, no, I'm not down on them. But Franklin does what Franklin does. They he recruits well, and he loses 2 games a year." And it's the same 2 games a year. And if you want me to say something different, win those 2 games.
Well,
And I hate to say it, I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah.
but just like the Bamas and the Georgias that have had these freshman 5-star quarterbacks excel, why can't it be this freshman 5-star quarterback?
Oh, well, it
know?
can be, and it very well might
I
be.
mean, everybody was real high on Hackenberg when he was here, and
Yeah.
I think we learned that was maybe more of a little bit of the wide receiver core and
well,
and
he
And
went
Bill
through
O'Brien.
and,
He-
and
he
the
went-
emergence of Saquon and all these things.
he went through a lot of transition
Yeah.
there too. So, listen, you've got to show it
Yep.
on those Saturdays. That's the end of that discussion. Speaking of Bama and Georgia, let's move on. It is time to look at the SEC future win totals. We talked on an earlier podcast about Georgia's cakewalk. I don't think we need to say anything more there. I want to point out a couple of teams to you guys.
I was gonna say, I don't see many surprises here, at least to me. Maybe Florida, but go ahead.
Well, not really. Remember, Florida lost to Vanderbilt last year. They have a long way to go, and it is odd to see them so far at the bottom. I want to highlight a couple. David, if you can just pull up the schedules of these teams here. First, I want to talk about LSU. LSU might be and should be favored to win the West because you know who else has a quarterback issue? We talked about it last week. Nick Saban.
That's saying a lot, though. That is saying a lot.
Brian Kelly doesn't. And, by the way, who beat Nick Saban last year? Brian Kelly.
Brian Kelly.
Okay, and
He already
who
got that
who won the West last year?
Brian Kelly.
Right. So let's look at this. Now, the schedule is tougher this year, including that opener against a surging Florida State team. Now, I want to make a comment here, and we're going to get into the ACC. I believe
Is that a neutral field again, too?
No, I think that's on campus.
Florida State is at Orlando.
Oh, it is
Camping
neutral.
World
Oh,
Stadium.
then it
Oh,
is.
so
I'm
it's
sorry.
like a bowl game.
It's like a bowl game.
Yep.
But again, I'm not there with Florida State yet. I think they are vastly improved from
Mike
where they were
Norvell's
when
got a good thing
when
going.
Jim left. But are they going to win the ACC? Got to prove it to me.
Okay.
And
Got
that's
to prove it to me.
And that's a big comeback game from last year.
Right.
Florida State probably
Yeah.
is feeling themselves a little bit. LSU's probably ready to be like, hey, that was a fluke.
Right. And look, when we talk about LSU, they lost that game last year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're going to be ready to come out firing.
But after that,
yeah.
They took off.
they took off. So that was my point there. Okay, now let's look at the schedule for LSU because I
Okay.
think it is a little tougher this year. So they open against Florida State.
Correct. And then
You're gonna give them that win? Let's give them the win.
Okay.
I think
It's a revenge
just
game.
on talent alone, LSU should win that game.
Okay, Dan, keep count.
Okay.
1. Okay.
We got a wanna.
Then they're against Grambling State.
2.
Yeah, they were going there. Mississippi State,
Where are
Wow.
they? You got to tell me where they're at.
Starkville.
That's tough.
That is tough.
That's a coin flip.
Talent-wise, they should win, but SEC conference
State and
conference road
transition.
games.
Yep.
But we'll give them that
Okay, everybody's favorite, Arkansas in Baton Rouge.
win.
Ole
that
Miss.
could be tough too.
Any of these
Wow.
could be tough. Where
Ole Miss.
at Ole Miss?
Oxford.
Wow.
I'm gonna let's just keep that one off.
Yep. So we're still
Okay.
at 4.
Okay.
Missouri in Columbia.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can
Okay.
win that one.
Auburn in Baton Rouge.
Yes.
Army.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow. This
And
is actually
then
pretty tough.
November 4th, the showdown with Bama in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, and that to me is the swing game
Yep,
right there.
Right there. So
So I'm just keep it off for now.
Yep.
Then you're home at Baton Rouge against Florida.
Yeah.
And then Georgia State.
Yep. The
Yeah.
November Cup.
So
game.
there's
And-
9.
And then you end up with A&M, which is another coin flip.
Where?
In Baton Rouge.
Then I'm going to give them that. So
Wow.
that's 10.
Wow.
But I think it comes down to the Alabama
Alabama
game
game.
in Tuscaloosa.
Well, and that could
As it
swing
always does.
Alabama's win total as well.
Right. I mean, that's exactly right. Okay, now the next one I want to talk about is Jimbo. We believe, and we talked to Sam Kahn about this, we know the situation there. Cue it up. Do we have the, can we hear it? No.
Oh,
No, you know what I want to hear.
Stand by.
We're going to
Jimbo
College
Land.
Station. Yes.
I mean, the sad trombone works as well.
It does, but that purr, man, I'm telling you, that Bobby Petrino purr, there's nothing like it.
Okay, I have the games here. We have New Mexico up first.
Win
Miami at Miami.
I'm not going to give them that one. Do you guys agree, though? Okay, they have the talent. They have Bobby Petrino. They could come out and throttle Miami at home, and I might raise an eyebrow at that.
Yep.
But I'm not going to give them that one right now because I saw what they were last year.
Yeah, and it's at Hard Rock, so it's not a
No,
neutral field.
it's there. So I'm going to leave that one off.
Okay, Louisiana Monroe. That'll be a tough one.
Don't
He
joke.
says with
They
a hint of
almost
irony.
didn't they lose to
Yes, they did.
Who did they lose to
Was
last
it
year?
Troy?
Something like that.
Yeah.
So
All right, Auburn comes into town.
okay, then I like them. They're in College Station for Hugh Freeze.
Yep.
Okay, fine.
And then they go to Arkansas.
Win.
At
They
A&T.
They Yep, and then they take on Nick Saban at home.
Yeah,
That could be a ton of fun.
That could be a tough one because keep in mind they beat them 2 years ago. They almost beat them last year. They're back home, but I'm still not going to give them that.
Now, they go to the upstart Josh Heupels.
Yeah, I can't give them that one either.
That 2-game stretch may be one
That's
of the hardest
brutal.
in college football.
Yeah, that's a good eye there.
And then they bring in South Carolina at home. We don't know what South Carolina's
No,
going to be.
they should be better, but I like to get them at home. I'll give them that at 5.
Then they go to Ole Miss.
Ooh, tough one. I think they can do that. I'll give it to them 6.
They welcome in Mississippi State.
7.
Who is ACU? Is that Alcorn State?
Yeah,
Albion
probably.
Christian
yeah.
Wildcats.
Okay. 8. So I'm at 8.
Okay.
And then you wrap it up with LSU.
Yep, LSU.
Where in
In
Baton
Baton
Rouge?
Rouge.
Yeah. So
Baton
I'm at 8.
Rouge.
Okay. So here's what I would do if you can get some action on this now. No, but I'm serious. That's what we're talking
Hey,
about.
Well, they are futures bets.
Right.
And
So
we
what
don't,
I'm
and we
but
don't
what I'm
play college athletics, so we're free to do
So
this.
we're clear.
we better be. We've been talking about it. But yeah, I think if you can get them at 7.5 now, I take the over
Wow.
because you have to assume. Look, I just got to 8, and that is. I mean, maybe it's being generous with one of the Mississippi schools, but I mean, also like they could beat Miami. They could beat Miami. All I'm saying is, all they need if I can get 7.5 today,
Yeah.
all they need is 8. I just got to 8, and you have to assume. Well, you don't have to assume. You could assume theoretically they're going to be slightly better.
Right.
They have the talent. That was
They have
never the
talent,
issue, right?
And the issue is now they should have the offense. Get in now before
Get
that
in
number
now.
goes up. 7.5, I would get in. 8.5, I'd stay away.
Yeah.
Does that?
seems
Would you
high.
agree with that?
I agree with that. I'm very curious to see what Ole Miss is going to be. You never know with Lane Kiffin.
Well, that's what I mean.
They
They're-
could go nuts.
They're hot and cold, and it all
Yep.
depends on what he mixes and matches from the portal.
Who got the job at Mississippi State? I feel like I have not
It was
heard
their
much
it was
about
their
that.
defensive coordinator. I think it's Zach somebody. and so he the kids know him. He really did wonders. He got the program to rally around him behind the passing of Mike Leach. So I think from that level, it's good. Because they didn't bring in an outsider. Now, how is he going to be? What type of talent do they have?
How does he
I
run
don't
the
know.
offseason? Right.
Yeah,
Zach Arnett.
Zach Arnett. So listen,
that's a name I don't know.
Well, and he's this is his first gig, I believe. So now,
And what do you think about? All right, so not to cut you off, but what do you think about Hugh Freeze, year one,
That-
6.5?
Dan, that was my third team. That's the one I want to talk about.
That's the
so
other one
you
that
guys,
kinda stood out
yep,
to me.
Me too. So let's pull up Hugh Freeze, and here's the situation with Hugh. This is why 6.5 is probably a good number, but let's break it down. This is the fun part of it. Hugh Freeze doesn't have a lot of talent. Now, he did just bring in a quarterback, right? He's been raiding the portal. He was pretty honest about it. He didn't quite do what Dion did, but Brian Harsin had some pieces there. It wasn't totally bare, but he didn't have a lot. And if you're Hugh Freeze and you're a magician, you've got to have a bag of tricks. He didn't have much in his bag or top hat. He's got a little more now after the portal. I think personally, it's going to be a tough year in year one for Hugh Freeze.
Well,
but
you say
listen,
that.
but
You
I say
say
that.
that.
Listen, if they can get what's the number? 6.5. If they can get to 7 wins, it's a total success. So where are we at with the schedule?
Well, I want to know who does their scheduling because last year they had all home games to start. I think they had 5 in a row.
I remember that. We were one of them.
Yeah. They get UMass at home to start. That should be a runaway, I would think. They go to Cal, which Cal is, what are they? I don't know.
I could think of a few things, but
Yeah.
okay, 2,
Then they get Samford at home.
3.
Then they go out to Jimbo Land.
That's a swing game right
That's
there.
a swing game.
And I think we gave that to Jimbo, so I will because it's in Jimbo World. So okay, 3.
Then they have to face the defending national championships at
home.
Auburn.
At home. You never know.
Oh, I think we know.
I think we know.
I mean, unless they're undefeated coming into that, and then all of a sudden there's hype around them.
Well, I mean, listen, Hugh Freeze has done it before, but I sitting here today, I can't give it to him.
Then they go to Baton Rouge.
I can't give that one to him. Still, see, all of a sudden it gets hard.
Yep. And then they get Ole Miss at home.
So just hold on a second. You're telling me that Hugh Freeze has to go to A&M.
Yep.
Is there a bye week in here? Has to go to A&M and then
No.
home
No bye
home
week.
against Georgia.
Then bye week.
Yeah, they have a bye week between Georgia and LSU.
Okay, but then the next game is LSU. That's a
Mine.
tough.
Yep.
And then
Okay.
Ole Miss.
At home. Yep.
Okay, I'm going to give him that. So that's 4.
And then Mississippi State comes to town.
Mm-hmm.
They get both of the Mississippis at home.
Both back to back. Yep.
5,
Yep.
Then they go to Vandy.
Yeah, 2 gimmies here.
6.
New Mexico State.
We missed Arkansas, so Arkansas is between them. So it's Vandy, Arkansas, then Auburn.
That's a split game. I'm going to give that to Sam Pittman just because I'm trying to keep things honest here.
Yep. And then New Mexico State's next, and then they end the year
7.
with the Iron Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking right at 7. If he can get to 7 wins, that would be an accomplishment
Pretty
with their
incredible.
talent.
Pretty incredible
Yeah.
stuff.
You know, it's funny how on these Vegas guys are when you start going
does that
looking
work?
at it. Yeah, it's funny.
Well, listen, but I mean, we could have set that line going through these schedules.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
some of
Well-
these games are 50-50, and then, who knows? Like, for example, we've had it, like Tennessee last year was that team that nobody saw coming.
Correct.
What if Arkansas is a 10-win team this year?
They
we
certainly
don't.
could be.
We don't know.
Could be
we
Ole
don't know.
Miss. Ole Miss could be undefeated.
Right. Okay, moving on. We want to talk about. We have a few minutes left here, so we
Might
want to
have
get.
to save a couple of these for next week. That'd be fine.
Well, that'd be fine because I like talking about them. I'm not sold on Florida State, but when you look at some of the ACC win totals, let's go to Clemson first because here's a team too where Dabo refuses
What's
to go
their
into
identity?
What's their identity? He refuses to go into the transfer portal. Did it leave a bad taste in your mouth with them getting shellacked by Tennessee in the Orange Bowl? Like where are they right now?
I'll tell you what gave me a bad taste: the way he handled the quarterback situation. I think he was too loyal to DJ. He waited too long. Then he was in and out with DJ Uyunglele, and
Well, they're just poor old little old Clemson. They're just poor little old Clemson.
I think.
And you are a big city guy coming in here, and you're telling Dabo and poor little old Clemson that he doesn't know what he's doing with his quarterbacks.
I think he cost them some wins last year. I really do.
They're just on the Roy bus.
Hey, listen. All I got to say is
The rest of y'all.
this could be a bad year for them.
Well, that's why I want to point out they are at 9.5. Now, listen, just remember what they were last year.
Well, and remember,
9.5 is a big number.
And remember what the ACC is too. I mean, that's the other aspect.
Well,
of
you
this.
can see it right in front of you. I would say beyond. You draw a line.
A lot of 6s in there.
Draw a line underneath Mac Brown.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's see if I can do that real quick.
Because if you do that, it's a crapshoot, is it not?
Correct.
Like I said, a lot of sixes.
Right? Because we don't know what
Yeah.
Miami's going to do. That seems high for them.
It does, but they seem to be figuring themselves out.
They're on the up, right?
Yeah.
Well-
Mario Cristobal.
Allegedly.
don't-
I don't want to hear it. I don't
don't
want to
know.
hear it.
We don't know
We
for
don't
sure.
know. But let's go over Clemson's schedule.
Yes. So Clemson, we have the Dukies up first. So
Win.
they start out in the ACC
You got to say where they're at, though.
at Duke.
At Duke. Ooh.
As far as I know, let me see if it's. It doesn't say it's neutral, so
So at Duke, okay,
they have a home
Win.
game against Charleston Southern. Didn't know they had a team.
win,
Florida Atlantic at home.
win.
Poor Owls. Then they get Florida State before the month is out at home.
Yeah,
That's a
that's a
tough-
swing game, and I can't give them that right now. Now, as much as I have questions about Florida State, there's your game. That's the game, and that's in the month of September.
Yes.
So we'll hold that one off. So that's what, 3? Did I give them 3 or 4?
You gave them the first 3.
Okay, first
then
3.
They're
Okay.
3-1 against the Seminoles.
Or at least, yeah, we don't know. But
right.
yeah.
And then they go to Syracuse. So they're 2 of their harder ACC games back to
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, I think, though,
And Syracuse isn't quite what they were last year either.
No, but they're competitive.
Yeah.
And Dino gets some
Not-
hype.
not-
but they
pushover in
almost
football
beat
anymore.
Clemson at home last year.
Yes, they did.
So, but
They should've
I'm
probably.
going to give that one to Dabo.
Okay. Wake Forest comes to town.
Well, and they come to town without Sam Hartman, so
Yep.
Dabo wins.
Clemson goes to Miami October 21st.
Okay.
That's
let's
after
keep
a
that
bye.
one. Let's
That's
keep,
after a bye.
But I'm going to keep that one away. I'm
Okay.
going to keep. So they're at 5 right now.
Then they go to NC State.
Yeah,
which
that might be
the
a
Wolfpack gives
trap
them
game.
fits.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to count that one right now. I like your thought there.
And then the revenge game. Notre Dame comes into Clemson.
Okay, I will give them that one. We'll give them that
Okay.
one.
Okay.
We'll see. I think you're right. I think we're going to have to save some of these conferences for next week. That's okay, right?
Yeah. And then Georgia Tech, which don't know what they have either. They've made a coaching change.
Yeah, we'll give them
They
that.
seemed to improve last year a little bit in the second half. UNC comes to town. Mac Brown coming to town the 18th of November.
Split it.
And then Clemson, South Carolina to cap it off. South Carolina home game.
Boy, so we have so let's talk about this. Vegas is at 9.5. I've got 7. Now let's talk about the 4 or 5. Okay, Florida State, Miami,
Yep.
North Carolina State,
Yep.
North Carolina, South Carolina. Wow. Now you would have to guarantee them 3 of those
Yeah.
to take the over,
I don't like that.
or
No,
you
I
would
don't
have
like
to
it
say, okay. So what are you guys saying? Are
I
you
go
guys
under.
you would go? So if you had to bet this today, you'd go under, and would you feel pretty confident about that?
Yes.
I think so.
Here's what I'm saying to you right now. I may get off of this podcast and go. Texas A&M over 7.5, Clemson under 9.5. If they win 9, you win.
Yeah.
I mean, some of those games are brutal games, right?
9's a big number in college football, you know?
It is. It is. And the problem with the ACC, remember the ACC Wheel of Destiny that they would spin on the ESPN show with Reese Davis and
Yep.
Lou Holtz and Mark May? Look at all of those teams. Who?
There's not much destiny there.
Well, who's going to be good and who's not? I don't know. No clue.
How do we feel about our friend Brent Pry right here at over under 5? That ain't great.
No, but again, what does he have to work with? He's only been there a year. He had no talent. Justin
and-
Fuente ran that into the ground.
When Manny Diaz bolts after this year, he could be our D coordinator again. That's all I'm saying.
Well, it's possible. He may have a soft landing spot.
Yep.
But that is a lineup right there. So maybe we save. You want to save the Big 12 and
Let's save the Big 12. Let's save Notre Dame and
the Pac-12.
The who?
Maybe we need to talk. Maybe by then they'll have a TV deal. If we wait another week.
Are they a conference at this point? I
Do
hardly
they
know
have
them.
12 teams?
It's
I
hard
don't
to say.
remember
They do.
anymore.
They do.
I know.
By the way, I had to scramble to find them, but
Well,
they
you
do.
know.
You know what we should add just for fun? Maybe the Sun Belt too, because
Oh.
the Sun Belt
They
surprising.
do not have numbers out right now. This is only for the Power 5. Maybe
Okay.
by next week they will, but right now it's only Power 5
Because
conferences.
I wouldn't mind seeing the Sun Belt and what's the other one? The
See, if we talk about the Sun
AAC.
Belt, that proves we're
AAC, yeah.
degenerates.
Well, we
because-
are degenerates, but
Yeah.
the Sun Belt, don't laugh at them because
No.
they have some good programs, and the same thing goes with the AAC.
Oh yeah. But
Actually, AAC in my mind might be stronger than the ACC.
listen, what's going to be fun too, and when I was putting these lists together, and this is probably why it's a good idea. We'll save it. But the Big 12, remember, they have new teams this year.
Yes,
Cincinnati,
everything's changing.
Cincinnati, BYU, UCF. Wait until you see some of those win totals, gentlemen. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So we like that Texas A&M, in talking this out, over 7.5. We like Clemson under 9.5 today. Was there
Could be
anything
severely under.
Was there anything in the Big Ten that stood out that might be worth a play?
To me, nothing's that surprising.
Well, you maybe thought about Nebraska.
Nebraska, I don't like.
But the problem is you don't
know. Yeah,
because
that's the
Matt
thing.
Rule could come in there and all of a sudden, Dan, they are playing like world beaters. Doesn't mean they're going to win 8 or 9 games, but they could. What's the number? 6?
6, yeah.
They could win 7.
I've heard this before, though. Scott Frost was supposed to be the world beater, and I have a hard time believing, as big of a fan base as that is, that you're going to get these young men interested in playing in the middle of nowhere.
Well, I hear
not
you.
the 90s.
I do, well,
Right.
but you know what? You guys are both right on that, and in many ways,
You're gonna have to overpay.
It's apples and oranges. But you know where it is the 90s again? In Tennessee, and I didn't think anybody could come in there and turn that program
Well,
around.
I'm skeptical he can do it again. Just saying.
Well, no, listen, but I will tell you, he's
No
had
Hendon
success.
Hooker.
He has had success everywhere he's been, and he came into Tennessee and he did it. Matt Rule has had success in college everywhere he's been.
True.
Yep, even Baylor, and that was a
And
dumpster
remember,
fire.
Dan, we are not talking about anything more than 6 games here. That's all.
So they could be the Purdue this year.
So I'm just suggesting take a look at it, But right now, like even the Penn State 9.5, that could go either way. I'm not seeing one where I would just, go on. Maybe Michigan State under, but even that, can Mel Tucker
Do you know who I believe in? Brett Bielema. 6.5 seems.
take the over? Do we have their schedule? We'll have to.
I can pull it up here
Yeah.
real quick. This will be the last one we go over. We're
Yeah.
running a little short on time.
But I mean, there's one that I would play today. I bet you I'd take the over on that.
Because I like his style. They
He
play
can at least get the 3 out of conference, right?
Toledo,
Win,
at Kansas,
win,
Penn State coming in,
loss,
Florida Atlantic coming in.
win,
They go to Purdue.
win.
They face Nebraska October 6th. That could be very telling.
Where?
At Illinois.
Oh, win.
They go to Maryland.
Split. I'm not going to count it.
They bring in Wisconsin and whatever they've got.
I'm not going to give them that.
They go to Minnesota.
Split.
They have Indiana at home.
Win. 6.
They go to Iowa.
Split.
And then they bring in Northwestern to round out the
Win. There's 7. Take it.
Yeah.
Okay.
They can get 7, and they might get 8 or 9.
Yep.
Like your Minnesotas, your Iowas, maybe.
They could beat Penn State.
They could. They're at home.
Mm-hmm.
So over 6.5 Illinois, over Texas A&M 7.5, and I like that Clemson under. You boys talked me into that one. We just don't know.
I think it's just too obvious.
Yeah.
I really do. I think Dabo's in a world of hurt right now.
That's going to do it for us on this episode of Weather Wagers. We thank you so much, Dan. Remind them where to go. And I got to run again. I'm going to run, but you guys wrap this up, and Dan, remind them on where to go. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, it has been a pleasure. Thank you, Brett, for contributing here in the time that you had. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, meteorologist Brett Thackeray, at Brett Thack, ABC27 on Twitter and Instagram. Then you can find me, Facebook meteorologist Dan Tomaso, at Doppler Dan on Twitter and Instagram. Weatherwagers@gmail.com. If you have any ideas, anything you'd like us to see covered here in the show, whether it is wagering or just sports talk, we are happy to accommodate. Plus, you can find us on YouTube and ABC27.com. That is a wrap for this week. Any last thoughts, Mr. Shiner?
We are.
We are Penn State. Let's get that over, baby. See you
Go.
next week.